I never thought I'd live to see the day when 3 grown men would pound on my front door, shouting threats at my wife just because I refused to sign a piece of paper joining a homeowners association. But that's exactly how this story began. A quiet life turned into a storm I never asked for. I had moved out to this little patch of land after retiring from the army. My wife, Linda, and I had always dreamed of a place where we could breathe easy. No noisy neighbors. No city politics. No one telling us what color we could paint our porch or how long the grass should be. Just us, our memories, and our German Shepherd, Ranger, who was as loyal as they come. The property was technically next to a neighborhood, but the way the lot lines were drawn decades ago, ours had never been under their HOA's control. And believe me, that was a blessing. I'd heard the stories folks fined for having the wrong mailbox. Kids scolded for chalk drawings on the sidewalk. Neighbors pitted against neighbors over nonsense rules. No, thank you. I'd served my country for 25 years. I wasn't about to let a self-appointed committee dictate how I lived the rest of my life. But then came Karen. She was the president of the HOA next door. And if you've ever met a woman who believed the entire world should bend to her will, then you've already met Karen in spirit. Perfectly styled hair, clipboard in hand, and that high-pitched, sugary voice that somehow made every word feel like an order. She introduced herself on my very first week there, all smiles and neighborly charm. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she said, standing at my fence line as though she owned it. "We'll need you to sign the HOA agreement by the end of the month. Just standard practice." I smiled back politely and told her what the county records already made clear. My property was never part of the HOA, and it never would be. Her smile faltered for half a second before snapping back in place. "Well," she said tightly, "I'm sure we can work something out. After all, it's for the good of the community." Just like that, she turned and left. At first, I thought that was the end of it. I'd dealt with plenty of strong personalities in my life, but Karen wasn't the type to accept no as an answer. Within a week, letters started showing up in my mailbox. Notice, non-compliance. Final warning, HOA membership required. Each one was typed in bold. Capital letters, with threats of fines, liens, even legal action. I tore them up and tossed them in the trash. Linda, though, was growing nervous. "Jack," she whispered one evening, holding the latest letter, "what if she really can do something? What if she drags us into court? We don't need that kind of stress." I took her hand and squeezed it. "Honey, she's bluffing. She doesn't have a single legal leg to stand on. Our land is free and clear. Don't let her scare you." Ranger lifted his head from where he was lying near the fireplace, as if agreeing with me. His ears perked whenever Linda's voice trembled. That dog always knew when something wasn't right. But Karen wasn't finished. The next week, I caught 2 HOA board members standing at the edge of my property with clipboards, jotting down notes about my lawn, my barn, even the color of my shutters. When I walked out to confront them, they scurried away like kids caught with their hands in the cookie jar. That night, someone knocked on our door at nearly midnight. Hard, urgent pounding that sent Linda sitting straight up in bed. Ranger was already growling before I reached for the shotgun I kept propped by the bedroom door. I flicked on the porch light, but by the time I opened the door, no one was there. Just the sound of car tires crunching on gravel in the distance. Linda's hands were trembling as she clutched, her robe tighter around herself. "Jack, I don't like this. This isn't normal neighborly stuff anymore. She's trying to scare us." And for the first time, I felt a seed of worry. Because she was right. This wasn't just annoying letters anymore. This was harassment. The following day, Karen showed up in person again. No smile this time, no sugary tone. Just cold eyes and a voice as sharp as broken glass. "You can make this easy or hard," she said flatly. "If you just sign the papers, we can all move on. Otherwise," she let the silence hang, but her meaning was clear. I stood firm. "Otherwise, what? You don't own me. You don't own my land. Now, unless you've got a warrant, step off my property." Her lips tightened, and she stormed off without another word. For a few days, things were quiet. Too quiet. Linda almost dared to hope it was over, but I knew better. Bullies rarely quit after one failed attempt, sure enough. One cold evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, 3 men I'd never seen before marched right up our driveway. Big guys, rough-looking, with that kind of swagger that told me they weren't there to chat about the weather. Ranger was on his feet instantly, teeth bared, a low growl rumbling deep in his chest. Linda gasped and clutched my arm as the men came closer. "Evenin'," the tallest one said, his voice mocking. "We're here on behalf of the Homeowners Association. Time you stopped being difficult and signed the paperwork." I stepped forward, keeping myself between them and my wife. "You're trespassing. You've got about 5 seconds to turn around and walk back down that driveway before you regret stepping foot on this property." The second man sneered. "Big talk for an old man." That's when I reached behind the door and racked the shotgun. The sound echoed across the yard like thunder, and all 3 froze. Ranger barked, loud and sharp, straining at the leash Linda had barely clipped on him in time. His teeth snapped, eyes locked on the tallest thug. The tallest man lifted his hands slowly. "No need for that. We're just here to talk." "You've had your talk," I growled. "Now leave." The men glanced at one another, muttering under their breath, but slowly backed away down the driveway. One of them spat in the dirt before they climbed into a black SUV and drove off. Linda let out the breath she'd been holding, shoulders sagging in relief. I lowered the shotgun, but didn't put it down, because deep inside, I knew this was only the beginning, and I was right. When I checked the mailbox the next morning, another letter was waiting. Only this one wasn't a printed notice. It was handwritten, scrawled in messy letters that chilled me to the bone. "Next time, the dog won't save you." I folded the note slowly, my fists trembling with anger. Ranger pressed his head against my leg, as if sensing the storm brewing in me. Linda's eyes filled with tears when she read the words. "Jack, what are we going to do?" she whispered. I looked out at the horizon, jaw set. "We're going to stand our ground. And when this all comes to a head, Karen's going to regret the day she thought she could bully us into submission." That night, the phone rang. It was an old friend, Sheriff Thompson. A man I'd served alongside years ago before he'd taken the badge. "I heard some things," he said quietly. "Got reports of men roughing up folks in your area." "Tell me, Jack. Karen bothering you again?" I hesitated, then told him everything. He sighed heavily. "Stay sharp, my friend. I'll keep an eye out, but Karen's got money and she's got influence. If she's sending people to your door, this isn't just neighborhood squabbling anymore. It's turning into something ugly." I thanked him, hung up, and sat in silence for a long while, listening to the quiet sounds of Linda moving around in the kitchen, Ranger's steady breathing by the fireplace. My home was supposed to be a place of peace, a place of safety. But thanks to one woman's obsession with power, it was quickly turning into a battlefield, and as I lay awake that night, shotgun resting within arm's reach, one thought echoed louder than the rest. If they come back, they won't just be facing me. They'll be facing a man who has nothing left to lose. The night after those men came pounding on my door, I barely slept a wink. Every creak of the house, every gust of wind through the trees outside, made my nerves stand on edge. Linda lay beside me, restless, her hand gripping mine so tight that I could feel the tremor in her bones. Ranger, ever faithful, lay at the foot of the bed, ears twitching at every sound. But it wasn't the darkness that kept me awake. It was the note. Those words burned in my mind like a brand. "Next time. The dog won't save you." I'd seen my share of threats in combat zones overseas, but never in my own home. And this time, the war wasn't for a cause or a country, it was for the safety of my family. The next morning, Linda tried to put on a brave face, but I saw the fear behind her smile as she poured my coffee. "Maybe we should just move," she whispered finally, staring down at the steam rising from her cup. "It's not worth it, Jack. Not if they're willing to hurt us." I set my cup down harder than I meant to, the clink echoing across the kitchen. "No, Linda. That's exactly what they want to scare us into running. This is our home. We earned this peace. I won't let them take it from us." Her eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. She'd been with me through deployments, through battles, and funerals. through nights when the weight of memory nearly broke me. She knew I wasn't a man who gave in to bullies, but that didn't make the fear any less real. Ranger patted over, pressing his head into Linda's lap. She stroked his fur absent-mindedly, and for a moment, I thought I saw her shoulders ease. That dog was more than a pet. He was our guardian angel in fur. By midweek, Karen made her move again. This time, it wasn't through goons at the door, it was through whispers in the neighborhood. When I drove into town for supplies, I could feel the stares. A man I'd shared coffee with at the diner turned his back when I walked in. A woman who used to wave at Linda from her porch suddenly pretended not to see me. At first I thought I was imagining things, but then I overheard it. Two men talking in hushed voices outside the hardware store. They say he threatened the HOA boys with a gun. Dangerous man. Violent. I clenched my fists, fury rising in me like a tide. Karen wasn't just trying to scare me, she was trying to paint me as some kind of menace. When I got home, Linda met me at the door, tears in her eyes. "The power went out," she said, "and I checked the neighbors' lights are all still on." Sure enough, when I looked at the breaker box, someone had tampered with it. A wire snipped clean. That was the breaking point. I called Sheriff Thompson. Within the hour, his cruiser pulled up our driveway. He stepped out, tall and broad, his badge gleaming under the late afternoon sun. "Jack," he said, his voice heavy with concern. "Tell me everything." So I did. From the first letter, to the midnight pounding, to the thugs, to the note. His jaw tightened with every word. "This isn't just harassment anymore," he said. "This is criminal intimidation. And if Karen's behind it, she's about to find herself on the wrong side of the law." Linda's voice trembled. "Sheriff, I'm scared. What if they come back when Jack's not here? What if they hurt Ranger? Or me?" Thompson's eyes softened. He took off his hat and held it against his chest. "Ma'am, I promise you nobody's going to hurt you on my watch. But you both need to stay sharp. Keep the doors locked. Keep that shotgun close. And Jack, don't do anything rash. Let me handle the law." I nodded, though inside I knew that if it came down to it, I'd do whatever it took to protect my family, law or no law. But Karen wasn't slowing down. If anything, she was escalating. The very next night, Linda woke me with a hand on my shoulder. "Jack," she whispered, her eyes wide. "Do you hear that?" At first, I thought it was the wind again, but then I heard it metal scraping against wood. From the barn, I grabbed the shotgun and slipped out the back door, Ranger at my side, silent as a shadow. The moonlight was faint, but I could make out 3 figures crouched near the barn doors, trying to pry the lock open. "Hey!" I roared, my voice cutting through the night like a blade. The men froze. One turned, crowbar in hand. Ranger snarled, teeth flashing in the dark. I leveled the shotgun at the ground near their feet and fired a warning shot. The blast echoed across the fields, and the men stumbled back, cursing. "Next one goes in the air," I growled. "Third one goes through you. Get off my property." 2 of them dropped their tools and bolted. The third hesitated, his face twisted with defiance. Before I could move, Ranger lunged forward, snapping his jaws inches from the man's leg. That was enough. He turned and ran, stumbling into the dark after his companions, and then came the red and blue lights. Sheriff Thompson's cruiser screeched up the driveway, gravel flying. He jumped out, gun drawn, scanning the yard. "Jack, you all right?" I lowered the shotgun, breathing hard. They were trying to break into the barn. 3 of them. 2 ran that way, 1 headed east. Thompson called it in on his radio, his tone clipped and urgent. Within minutes, backup arrived. They combed the property, and before long, they hauled 2 of the men out of the woods in handcuffs. But the third slipped away. Linda rushed out, wrapping her arms around me, her body trembling. "I can't live like this, Jack," she sobbed. "I'm scared every time the sun goes down. This isn't what we dreamed of. This isn't Pisot's war." I held her close, my heart breaking at the weight of her words. She was right. I'd promised her a quiet life, and instead, I'd delivered a battlefield. Sheriff Thompson put a heavy hand on my shoulder. Jack, I'll do everything I can. But you need to prepare yourself. Karen's not going to take this lying down. She'll spin it, make it look like you're the aggressor. She's already planting seeds in the community. And sure enough, as if on cue, headlights appeared at the end of the driveway. A car pulled up, and out stepped Karen herself, her heels clicking against the gravel, her face twisted in righteous fury. "What's going on here?" she demanded, her voice shrill. "Why is there a police car on my street?" Sheriff Thompson's eyes narrowed. "Karen, we just apprehended 2 men trespassing and attempting to break into this barn. Men who, I suspect, were hired by someone very close to this situation." Karen gasped dramatically, clutching her chest. "That's absurd. Jack is the problem? Here he's dangerous. He threatened my board members. He brandished a weapon, and now he's firing guns in the middle of the night." I stepped forward, fury burning in my veins. "You sent them, Karen. Don't you dare stand there and act innocent." She smirked, her voice dripping with mockery. "Prove it." For a moment, silence hung heavy in the air, broken only by the sound of Ranger's low growl. Sheriff Thompson's jaw clenched. "Karen, I suggest you go home before I find a reason to put you in cuffs tonight." She huffed, spun on her heel, and stormed back to her car. But before she drove off, she leaned out the window, her eyes locking with mine. "This isn't over," she hissed, and as her taillights disappeared into the night, I knew she was right. That night, Linda and I sat together in the quiet of the living room. Ranger curled up at our feet. She leaned her head on my shoulder, her voice barely above a whisper. "How much longer can we live like this, Jack? How much more can we take?" I kissed the top of her head, my heart heavy. "As long as it takes, Linda, because this is our home, and no one, not Karen, not her thugs, not anyone is going to drive us out." But deep down, I knew the storm hadn't yet reached its peak. Karen had money. She had influence. And most dangerous of all, she had pride. And pride, I knew from experience, was the kind of weapon that could burn down everything in its path. I woke the next morning with the weight of the world pressing down on my chest. Linda was still asleep, her face pale even in the soft morning light, and Ranger lay curled at her feet, finally resting after a night of tension. But my mind wasn't at peace. Every word Karen had spat at me echoed in my skull. This isn't over. She wasn't bluffing. I'd known enough stubborn commanders and prideful politicians in my time to recognize the kind of arrogance that couldn't let go. And Karen, with her fake smiles and iron grip on her little kingdom, was exactly that type. I sat on the porch with my coffee, shotgun resting against the rail, watching the sun climb over the tree line. Peaceful, beautiful, but fragile. Too fragile for what was coming by noon. The rumors had already reached me. Sheriff Thompson stopped by in his cruiser, stepping out with a grim expression. "Jack, you need to hear this before it blindsides you. Karen's been busy. She's telling anyone who will listen that you attacked her board members, that you fired a gun recklessly, that you and Linda are unstable, dangerous people." Linda, who had just stepped out with a tray of sweet tea, nearly dropped it. "What? That's a lie." Thompson's voice softened. "I know, but lies spread fast. Half the folks in town think you're a loose cannon. She's even talking about suing you for harassment." I clenched my jaw so tight it hurt. "She's the one sending thugs to my door, cutting my wires, scaring my wife half to death. And she wants to call me dangerous?" Thompson shook his head. "She's playing this like a chess game, and she's betting on the community siding with her. But don't lose hope. Truth has a way of surfacing. Sometimes it just takes longer than we want." I appreciated his words, but anger burned hotter in me than comfort. Because this wasn't just about my reputation. This was about my wife's safety. And I wasn't about to wait around for Karen to roll her dice again, sure enough. 2 nights later, the storm broke. Linda woke me with a start just after midnight. "Jack, listen." Male voices, low but urgent, outside near the barn again. I grabbed the shotgun. Ranger was already at the door, hackles raised. This time I didn't wait. I stepped out onto the porch, racking the shotgun loud enough for them to hear. "You've had your warnings." I shouted into the dark. "This is the last time you trespass on my land." But instead of scattering, The voices grew louder. And then I saw them, 5 figures, marching up the driveway, flashlights bouncing. One carried a baseball bat. Another, I swear, had something that looked like a crowbar. Karen hadn't just sent a couple of thugs this time. She'd sent an army. Linda's terrified gasp behind me nearly broke my resolve. But Ranger's deep thunderous bark reminded me wasn't alone. I fired a shot into the air. "Turn around," I roared. "You take one more step, and the next one's not a warning." The men hesitated. But one, the tallest, sneered. "She told us you'd cave. She told us you're just a washed-up old soldier hiding behind a dog and a gun." Time to prove her wrong. He stepped forward. Ranger lunged down the steps, teeth flashing, a blur of fury and loyalty. The man stumbled back, cursing as the others panicked, and then floodlights. Red and blue. Sirens screaming down the driveway. Sheriff Thompson's voice bellowed over the chaos. "Freeze. Drop your weapons and get on the ground." The sight of deputies pouring out of cruisers, guns drawn, was enough to end it. The thugs dropped their weapons, cursing and shouting as they were shoved face down into the dirt and cuffed. Ranger barked triumphantly, tail high. Circling like the hero he was, Linda collapsed against me, sobbing in relief. But just as I thought it was over, a familiar car screeched to a halt at the end of the driveway. And out stepped Karen, her heels sinking into the gravel, her face a mask of fury. "This is outrageous," she shrieked. "You can't arrest them. They were protecting the community from a violent maniac." Thompson turned on her, his voice cold as steel. "Karen, enough. I've got sworn statements, I've got physical evidence, and now I've got 5 men caught red-handed on Jack's property. And I've got witnesses ready to testify that you orchestrated every last bit of this." Her face drained of color. "That's a lie." One of the arrested men, the tall one, barked a bitter laugh. "Lie, lady? We got paid straight out of the HOA account. Don't act like you weren't pulling the strings." The words hung in the night like a hammer blow. Thompson's eyes narrowed. "Karen, you're under arrest for criminal conspiracy, harassment, and misuse of association funds." The sound of cuffs clicking around her wrists was the sweetest music I'd ever heard. The weeks that followed were a blur. Karen was charged. Her name splashed across the local paper in headlines she'd never dreamed of. The HOA board crumbled, half of them resigning in shame, the rest scrambling to save face. And me. I just kept living. Fixing the barn door, planting Linda's favorite flowers out front, sitting on the porch with my coffee, Ranger at my feet, watching the sun rise over a land that was finally, blessedly, ours again. One day, as I walked into town, the same folks who had turned their backs on me weeks before now stopped to shake my hand. They apologized, offered free meals, even thanked me for standing up against Karen's madness. But I didn't feel like a hero. I just felt tired. Tired, but grateful. Grateful that Linda was safe. Grateful that Ranger had stood by me. Grateful that, once again, peace had returned. One evening, Linda and I sat on the porch together, the sunset painting the sky in gold and crimson. She leaned against me, her voice soft. "Jack," she said, "I'm proud of you. I know I was scared. I know I doubted. But you stood your ground. You showed me that home is worth fighting for." I kissed her forehead, my throat tight. "I didn't do it alone. I had you. I had Ranger. And I had Thompson watching my back. Family, loyalty, truth, that's all that matters." She smiled through her tears. "And now, it's finally over." I nodded, though deep inside, I knew life never truly runs out of storms. But sometimes, when you weather one, the calm that follows tastes sweeter than anything else. As I scratched behind Ranger's ears, I thought about the lesson buried in all of it. Karen thought power was about control, about forcing people to bend. But true strength, real power, wasn't about fear. It was about love. Love for your family, your home, your freedom, and love, I realized, was something no HOA, no thug, no Karen could ever take away. Karen sent thugs to my door, But all she really did was remind me that when you protect your family with love and courage, no bully on earth can ever break you.